Okay, so we come to the last section, the last part of the Genesis story. It goes from 37 till the end, till chapter 50. And today we read chapters 37 and 38. Wow. Well, if you've already read them, these are two really big stories. It's the start, chapter 37, of Joseph and his brothers. And then in chapter 38, it's the kind of aside story about Tamar and Judah. Now, as much as I want to explain to you the Tamar story, because if I'm honest, there is a lot that needs to be explained, I'm actually not going to chat about that today because I want to focus on the Joseph story. That is the story that we're going to be talking about for the next 6 weeks. So I feel like it's important to get this kind of foundational chapter under our belts. Some of you might be thanking me for not looking at the Tamar and Judah story because we've already heard enough terrible stories about the mistreatment of women in Genesis. Am I right? But alas, let's get into this story about Joseph and his brothers. So we hear about Jacob's son Joseph. He is 17 years old and he is hated by his brothers on three accounts, the story says. The first thing we hear is that he was tending the flock with some of his older brothers, the other sons of Leah, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now we see the riff here between the sons of Leah and the sons of Rachel. He brings a bad report about the sons of Leah. Now, we aren't told whether the report is true or not. So at best, Joseph is a tattletale, a dibber-dobber, and at worst, he is a bold-faced liar, making up lies about his brothers so they can get in trouble from their father. So that's the first reason. The second reason his brothers hate him is because Joseph is clearly Jacob's favorite son. His dad is shameless about the fact that he's a favorite because he makes him a colorful robe to make Joseph stand out as the favorite son. Now, this garment has become celebrated in movies and musicals, but ultimately it is a love of a father's partial love. Sorry, it's a mark of a father's partial love. His unfair love for one son rather than the others. It's actually quite an awful thing. A colourful robe to constantly catch the eyes of the other brothers, to remind them that they are they are less important to their father. And every time they see it, they are reminded. It's like what Rachel's beauty did to Leah every time she saw it. So, verse 4 says, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and they could not speak a kind word of him. And then the third reason that they hate him is the dreams. Verse 5, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. So he tells them about this dream and they blow up. And then he has another dream where their brothers will bow down to him, and even his mother and father will bow down to him. And they get angry about it again. Now, Joseph has not learned his lesson the first time. And verse 11 tells us that his brothers were even more jealous and that his father kept the matter in mind. Now, jealousy is probably an understatement. They hated him, they hated him, they hated him, and they were jealous of him. No, it's a mistranslation. They hated him and they were murderous towards him, is probably what it's getting at. So, where does the story go from here? Well, the brothers are out herding flocks about 30 k's from home, and Jacob decides to send Joseph to them to check on them and to make sure that they are safe. Verse 14, go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks and bring word back to me. But what Jacob doesn't realize is that in sending Joseph to the brothers, he is jeopardizing the safety of his favorite son. In trying to maintain the safety of all the boys, he's actually putting his favorite son in harm's way. And Joseph heads out to the brothers, and they see him a far way away, and they are a far way from home, and they plot with each other. Here comes that dreamer, they say. Come, let us kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we will see what will come of his dreams. But the oldest brother, Reuben, steps in as the voice of reason. Now, very interesting, Reuben is protective back in I'm confusing Reuben with Simeon and Levi, forget that. So Reuben steps in as the voice of reason. Let's not take Joseph's life. Don't shed any blood. Throw him in the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this because he wanted to rescue him and take him back to his father. And so Joseph arrives and they strip him of his robe, the symbol of his favoritism, and they throw him into an empty cistern. And then they sit down next to the cistern and they eat the food that Joseph has brought to them. And we're told later in the story that Joseph cries out for mercy from the hole in the ground, but they did nothing. It reminds you of the Cain and Abel story where it says that the blood of the brother cries out from the ground. There's this crying from the surface that's happening. And then shortly after, a train of Ishmaels are headed to Egypt, loaded with camels, and Judah sees dollar signs. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him and not lay a hand on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." And they all agree. And so they sell him to the Ishmaelites, and the Ishmaelites sell him to Egypt. Now the brothers tell their dad that a ferocious animal had killed Joseph. They take the robe and they kill a goat and dip the robe in the blood of the dead goat and take it to their dad and say, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." Now remember that Jacob himself took the remains of a dead animal and his brother's robe, and he used those two things to deceive his father Isaac. And now we have Jacob being deceived in exactly the same way. There is all of this divine retribution and ironic justice in these stories. It's so wonderful to read. Okay, what can we take from this? Well, two things. When you scratch away the surface of people to find out what people are really like, what do you expect to find? Maybe you think you'll find goodness. I think that our culture tells us that deep down in every person is ultimate goodness. The best thing that a person can do is dig deep into themselves and bring out the goodness that they find there. But I wonder if that's actually true. This story, I think, is a bit more honest about what humanity is like. If you dig deep into a person, you will find goodness. Like Reuben in this story, you'll find love and something wonderful. But when you dig deep into a person, you will also find spite and bitterness and jealousy, hatred, favoritism, self-centeredness, regret, and arrogant teenage boys, just like we find in this story. That is what people are like. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, that is what we are like as well. Now, if this is what humanity is like, what hope do we have? What hope do we have for the future? If this is what humanity is like and it's just constantly spiraling downward, what hope do we have to save ourselves? And that's why this story is so helpful, because in this story, God intervenes. Because God gives Joseph a dream about what the future will be like, showing Joseph that the day will come when his family will bow down to him. Now, by the end of this chapter, that seems like the furthest thing from reality. But the things that the dream tell us is that God knows the future. In fact, better than that, God is in control of the future. And that is a comfort for us to know that God is in control of the future. Though right now it might feel like you're on the road to Egypt, God is in control and he has told you what your future is. And so we should trust in the promises of God for our future. And they can be so helpful in times of uncertainty, times of trial, times of anxiety, where we don't know what the future will hold. We know that we worship the one who holds the future in his hands. God is in charge of history. He is in charge of the future. And he's making it all work out according to his plan. That should comfort us. See ya.